Welcome to Nachtmeier Witness. Some nights feel wrong before anything happens. The air feels heavy, the room feels colder, and somewhere in the dark, you get the strange feeling that you are being watched. Tonight, you will hear stories from people who became witnesses to things they never expected to see. Some saw someone standing in the shadows. Some heard voices with no one nearby. Others found themselves in places that did not feel real at all. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where you are listening from tonight. And if you enjoy true scary stories with a slow, dark atmosphere, subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness. Get comfortable. The night has already begun. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone. It was the kind of place where life moved slowly and nothing ever felt too far away. People recognized your family name before they really knew you. They knew which house belonged to your parents. They knew what car your dad drove, where your mother worked, and which kids belonged to which family. In a place like that, danger never felt like something close. It felt like something from other places, bigger places, places with strangers and crowded streets. My parents' house was about a mile outside town, surrounded by open land, trees, quiet roads, and the kind of darkness that only exists away from streetlights. During the day, it was peaceful. There was space to breathe, space to walk, and enough distance from town to make everything feel private. At night, though, that same space became something else. The roads got darker. The fields looked empty in a way that did not feel comforting. The trees did not look like scenery anymore. They looked like places where things could wait. When I was younger, especially during the summer, I would sometimes sneak out at night to meet my friends in town. It was not anything dramatic or criminal, just teenage stupidity. We wanted more time together. We wanted to talk, wander around, maybe stay out longer than we were allowed. Back then, getting away with it felt exciting, like we were breaking some huge rule, even though we were mostly just walking around doing nothing. The real problem was getting back home. The main road was longer, and I did not want to risk being stopped by local police for being out so late. In a small town, cops knew people. If one of them saw me walking at the wrong hour, there was a good chance my parents would hear about it before I even got home. So I had a shortcut. Between my parents' house and the town was a large golf course. Behind the golf course was an old trail that cut through the woods. Years earlier, a railroad had run through that area, and even after the tracks were gone, the path remained. It was one of those forgotten places that never fully disappeared. People stopped using it for what it was built for, but the land kept the shape of it. The ground stayed flatter in certain places. The trail still ran in a long, quiet line through the trees. Over time, nature had taken most of it back. Leaves covered the ground. Weeds grew along the edges. Branches reached over the path. In some places, the trail was still clear enough to follow. In others, it felt like the woods were slowly trying to erase it. During the day, it was just an old path. Quiet, maybe a little eerie, but nothing too strange. It saved me a lot of walking, and because I had used it many times, I felt comfortable there. At night, it was different. The darkness changed everything. On that trail, sounds carried in strange ways. A small crack from somewhere far off could seem like it happened right beside you. Leaves moved even when there was no clear wind. Trees stood close enough that the path felt narrow, even when it was not. Every branch became a shape. Every patch of shadow looked deeper than the last one. But I knew the route. I had walked it before. I knew where it curved, where it opened toward the golf course, and where the old college building sat nearby. So even though the trail felt creepy sometimes, I trusted it. Until one night when everything changed. I was walking home late, moving along the old railroad trail through the woods. The town was behind me, my parents' house was ahead, and I was already thinking about getting inside quietly, without waking anyone. The night was calm in that heavy way summer nights can be, but the woods were quiet. Too quiet, maybe, though I did not think that at first. I could hear my own footsteps on leaves and dirt. I could hear my breathing. Every now and then, some insect sound would rise and fade away. Then I heard something behind me. Crunch. A leaf breaking under weight. I stopped. The sound stopped too. For a second, I listened, standing still in the dark, with the trail stretching behind me. I told myself it was nothing. The woods were full of animals. Deer moved through there all the time. Smaller creatures too. Raccoons, possums, maybe stray dogs. Sometimes people camped in the area without permission. There were plenty of normal explanations. I started walking again. A few seconds later, I heard it again. Crunch. This time, I tried not to stop. I kept moving and told myself that if I acted normal, I would feel normal. But the sound kept coming. Not constantly at first, just enough. A leaf here, a twig there, a soft shift of weight behind me. It did not sound like a deer moving off through the brush. It did not sound random. It sounded like something on the trail. After a few minutes, I noticed the thing that made my stomach tighten. The sound was following me, not moving away, not crossing the woods. Following, there is a difference, and once you notice it, you cannot unnotice it. Random animal sounds scatter. They pause, move away, return from another direction. But this sound stayed behind me. When I walked, it walked. When I slowed, it seemed to slow. When I picked up my pace, the sounds kept coming, maybe even a little closer. I told myself not to panic. Maybe it was someone else walking the trail. Maybe another kid taking the same shortcut. Maybe someone camping nearby who had come out to see who was there. Maybe my own fear was turning ordinary sounds into something worse. But my instincts were telling me something was wrong. I picked up my pace. The crunching behind me did not stop. That was when the trail stopped feeling familiar. I had walked it so many times before, but suddenly I became aware of how isolated it was. There were no houses right beside it, no porch lights, no cars passing close enough to help, just trees, old railroad ground, and darkness. I could not see far behind me, and I did not want to look too long because I was afraid of what I might see. Eventually, I decided to leave the trail. I cut across toward the golf course and moved in the direction of an old abandoned college building nearby. That building had always been strange, even during the day. It was huge and Gothic-looking, built with massive stone walls and old architecture that made it feel like it belonged in another country or another century. The college had closed down in the 1970s, and by the time I was sneaking around those woods, the building had been empty for years. During the day, it was odd, but manageable. A weird old landmark. A place people talked about. Empty windows, heavy stone, overgrown paths, and the sense that the building had been left behind by time. At night, though, it felt completely different. The old walls looked black. The windows looked hollow. The whole place sat there like something watching over the golf course and the woods. I did not choose that direction because I wanted to go near the building. I chose it because I thought whoever was behind me would probably stay on the main trail. The path near the old college was overgrown. Less people used it. It was not the easy way. I figured if someone was casually walking behind me, they would keep to the trail, and I could cross the golf course and get home without being followed. For a little while, it seemed like I was right. The sounds stopped. The woods became quiet again. I started to relax, just a little. That small relief might have been the worst part, because it made the next moment hit harder. I reached one of the old entrances to the abandoned college. I had passed the building many times before. I had even explored around it during the day. It never bothered me too much then. But that night, as I got close, something looked different. The entrance had been boarded up before. It had always been covered, sealed off. Not perfectly, maybe, but enough to show that nobody was supposed to go in. That night, the boards were gone, not neatly removed. Broken pieces were scattered across the ground. The doorway stood open. Dark, empty. I stopped and stared at it. There is something deeply wrong about an abandoned building with a freshly opened entrance at night. It feels like a mouth. It feels like something has either come out or gone in. The darkness inside did not look like normal darkness. It looked thicker, colder, older. I could not see beyond the doorway, and every part of me said the same thing. Do not go inside. I did not. I turned away. Whatever curiosity I might have had during the day was gone. I did not care why the boards were broken. I did not care who had gone in. I did not care what was inside. At that point, the whole night felt wrong enough that I wanted distance from the building, from the trail, from the woods, from everything. I moved back toward the golf course and started walking faster. Then I heard it again, the noise. But this time, it was not behind me on the trail. It was coming from the woods beside me. And it was louder, much louder. The sound was different now. It was not the clear crunch of footsteps. It was not the sound of someone walking normally through leaves. It had a rhythm that made no sense. There was no pause between steps, no break where a foot lifted and came down again. It was continuous, like something dragging through the woods, constant, steady, getting closer. That sound made my blood turn cold. It did not match any animal I knew. It did not match a person walking. It sounded like movement without a normal body behind it, like something pushing or pulling itself through the brush without stopping. That was when fear took over. I started jogging across the golf course. I did not care about being quiet anymore. I did not care if someone saw me. I did not care if I got caught sneaking home. I just wanted space between myself and whatever was moving through those woods. The open grass of the golf course should have made me feel better, because it meant I was no longer trapped between trees. But it also meant I was exposed. The woods were behind and beside me, and the old college building sat nearby in the dark with its broken entrance open. I could see the road near my house ahead. I thought I was almost safe. Then I heard something else. A sound from behind me. A laugh. Not loud. Not theatrical. Not like someone trying to scare me in an obvious way. It was quieter than that. A small laugh carried through the night air. Soft enough that for 1 second I wondered if I had heard it at all, but clear enough that my body reacted instantly. It sounded human, but not friendly, not amused in a normal way. It was the kind of laugh that makes you feel like someone knows something you do not. I stopped. I wish I had not. I looked back toward the trail and the edge of the woods. That was when I saw something. At first, it was only a silhouette standing in the grass. The moonlight gave me just enough visibility to make out its shape. It was tall, very tall. Too tall to make easy sense of at that distance. The figure looked thin, stretched out in a way that felt wrong. Its arms seemed unusually long. Its legs looked strange too, like the proportions did not belong to a normal person. I stood there, frozen, trying to make my brain explain what I was seeing. A person? Someone wearing something? A trick of the shadows? A tree trunk lined up with branches? A deer standing at an odd angle? None of those answers felt right. The figure was upright. It looked aware. It looked like it was standing there on purpose, facing my direction. I could not see a face. I could not see details. Just height, thinness, long arms, and a shape that seemed almost human, but not human enough. Then it moved. That was the moment I lost any remaining thought of staying calm. The movement did not look normal to me. Its legs did not seem to bend the way a person's legs should bend. The motion was wrong, like something trying to imitate a human walk without understanding the body it was pretending to use. It was not smooth in a natural way. It was not clumsy either. It was something else. Something that made my mind reject it instantly. I know how strange that sounds. Even now, years later, I know how impossible it sounds. But that is what I saw. And in that moment, I was not thinking about proof or explanations. I was not thinking about how it would sound if I told someone later. I was not thinking about whether anyone would believe me. I was terrified. I turned and ran. I ran harder than I had ever run before. I ran toward my house, yelling as I went. I did not care if my parents heard me. I did not care if neighbors heard me. I did not care about sneaking anymore. The whole reason I had taken the shortcut was to avoid being caught out late, and suddenly being caught sounded like the safest thing in the world. I did not look back. There are moments when looking back feels like death. Your body understands that every second matters, that every turn of the head could slow you down, that seeing what follows might break the last bit of control you have. So I ran. The golf course stretched ahead like it was longer than it had ever been. The grass felt uneven under my feet. My lungs burned. My legs pushed harder than they ever had. The road got closer. My house got closer. Safety got closer. But behind me, in my mind, I could still see that tall, thin thing moving in the moonlight with legs that did not work the way they should. I ran until I got home. That was the last time I ever walked that trail at night. After that, I took another route. I did not care how much longer it was. I did not care if it put me closer to roads, streetlights, or police. I did not care if it took extra time. Nothing was worth walking that old railroad path in the dark again. For years, I tried to explain what happened. I still have tried, honestly. Maybe it was someone playing a trick. Maybe some local person knew about the trail and liked scaring kids who used it. Maybe there was someone camping in the old building or the woods, and I stumbled too close to where they were staying. Maybe the broken entrance to the college had nothing to do with the sounds, and my fear connected things that were not connected. Maybe it was an animal seen from a strange angle. Maybe it was a person with long clothing, or carrying something, or moving strangely because of uneven ground. Maybe fear changed how my brain processed the shape. I understand all of that. I know fear can distort things. I know moonlight can lie. I know shadows can make people see bodies where there are only trees. I know the human brain tries to build patterns out of darkness. But there are parts I cannot explain away. The footsteps behind me, the way they seem to follow, the abandoned college entrance, boards broken and scattered like something had opened it recently, the dragging sound moving through the woods beside me, the quiet laugh, the tall silhouette in the moonlight, the long arms, the strange legs, the way it moved. Those details do not fade. They sit together in my memory like pieces of something I was never supposed to understand. The strangest part is that this happened in the mid-1990s. That matters to me because it was years before similar-looking figures became popular online. There was no internet culture filling my head with images. No videos, no forums, no social media stories about tall, thin creatures in the woods. I had not absorbed some modern legend and then imagined it on a dark trail. It was just me, a small town shortcut, An old railroad path, an abandoned Gothic college building, and something I still cannot explain. People sometimes ask why certain memories stay with us for so long, why one night can follow someone for decades. I think it is because fear is not always about knowing what happened. Sometimes the strongest fear comes from never getting an answer. If a person had jumped out and yelled, I could have hated them. If an animal had stepped into the light, I could have laughed later. If the police had found someone living in the old college, I could have put a name to it. But I got none of that. Only sounds. A broken doorway. A laugh. A shape. And then the need to run. That trail was just an old path through the woods before that night. The abandoned college was just a creepy old building. The golf course was just open grass between town and home. My walk back was supposed to be routine, just another teenage shortcut I had taken too many times to fear. But after that night, those places were different. The trail became the place where something followed me. The college became the place with the open black doorway. The woods became the place where dragging sounds came from the side instead of behind. The golf course became the place where I looked back and saw something standing in the moonlight. And my house became the place I ran toward like it was the only thing left in the world. I have never walked that way after dark since. I do not know what I saw. I do not know what followed me. I do not know what made that dragging sound or that quiet laugh. I only know that on that night, the shortcut stopped being a shortcut. It became a warning. And whatever stood in the moonlight near that old trail, with its long arms and wrong moving legs, made sure I never ignored that warning again. I still think about that night sometimes, not because I know exactly what happened. Actually, the opposite. I think about it because I never found a real answer. It was just a normal night after a cross-country meet. A long day. A tiring day. The kind of day where everyone is exhausted but still excited because the team had done well. Our bus finally arrived back at school late that night. It was not quite midnight, but it was close. Everyone was tired, but we were also happy. We had just finished competing, and as a team we spent a little time celebrating our victory before everyone started leaving with their families. Most of the athletes were picked up by parents. But I was one of the few people who had my own car. That meant I had to make the walk across the school grounds to the student parking lot. I was not alone though. Another runner from the team needed a ride home, and I had already promised I would drop her off. So we walked together. At that point, everything felt completely normal. We were talking about the meet. We talked about how she had finally achieved a personal record. We laughed about the day. We talked about how exhausted we were. She thanked me for driving her home so late. It was just two teammates walking through a mostly empty school parking lot after a long competition. Nothing felt strange. Nothing felt dangerous. Until we reached my car. We loaded our bags and school supplies into the trunk. I got inside and started the engine. The car was running. The headlights came on. My friend was still finishing putting her things away. Then, without warning, the passenger door flew open. She jumped into the car, and she was screaming, "Drive, Bromonster." I had never heard her sound like that before. She was not joking. She was not playing around. She sounded terrified. And when someone you know suddenly reacts like that, your brain does not stop to ask questions. You do not calmly investigate. You do not ask for details. You just react. So I slammed my foot on the gas and got out of there. We left the parking lot as quickly as possible. My heart was already racing because her reaction alone scared me. But then, as we were driving away, I saw something. A flash. Something near the football field beside the parking lot. At first, my brain could not process it. Then I saw what looked like two glowing red eyes. The first thought I had was that it was an animal, Maybe headlights reflecting off a deer, maybe something wild standing near the field. But then I noticed something else. Something that looked like teeth reflecting light. White, bright, visible for only a moment. And that was enough. I went from confused to terrified. My entire body reacted before my mind could catch up. My heart was beating so hard, it felt like it was pushing against my chest. Everything became blurry. My hands felt disconnected from me. It was like my body was driving on instinct. I could not even properly feel my grip on the steering wheel. Later, I noticed part of the fake leather covering on the steering wheel had been damaged. I must have been gripping it so hard that I tore it. I do not remember doing it. I was just trying to get away. The strange thing was that even though I was panicking, somehow my body still kept control. I did not lose focus completely. I did not crash. I did not put my passenger in danger. We managed to drive far enough away from the school that we could breathe again. Eventually, we reached a highway near the school and turned into an open gas station. We parked there just trying to calm down. That was when we realized something else. My trunk was still open. During our escape, we had left it open the entire time. A lot of our school supplies had fallen out while we were driving away. At that moment, we did not even care. The missing items did not matter. All that mattered was that we were away from whatever had scared us. My friend was still shaking. She was so frightened that she barely wanted to talk. But eventually, I got her to explain what happened, and her story made everything even stranger. According to her, she had seen something in the football field before she got into the car. At first, she thought it was a large deer, a big buck standing in the grass. That would have made sense. The area around the school had wildlife. Seeing a deer at night was not impossible. But then, I started the car, and the thing stood up. That was the moment she panicked. Because whatever she saw did not move like she expected. She described it as something much taller than a normal animal, something standing upright. The closest comparison she could make was that it looked like Slenderman with deer antlers and a more muscular body. Obviously, that description sounds impossible. And even she knew how strange it sounded. But that was the image she had in her mind after seeing it. Two people, a dark parking lot, a football field, something moving in the distance, and two completely terrified teenagers trying to understand what they had just seen. After we had both calmed down, I drove her home. But the experience stayed with me. That night, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying everything. The screaming, the glowing eyes, the way she had jumped into the car, the feeling that something was watching us. I ended up keeping various things near my bed because I felt uneasy. I was trying anything to distract myself and convince my brain that everything was fine. But it was difficult, because fear does not always disappear just because you know something might have a logical explanation. Sometimes your brain keeps asking, what if? The next morning, once the sun was up, everything felt different. Darkness has a way of making ordinary places feel completely unfamiliar. The parking lot that seemed terrifying at night was just a school parking lot during the day. The field that seemed threatening was just grass. That sunlight gave us confidence. So later that day, my friend and I decided to go back. We wanted answers. We wanted to know if there was actually something there. When we arrived, we noticed something immediately. The stuff we had lost from the trunk was destroyed, torn apart, scattered around. It looked like something had been searching through it, like animals had gotten into it. That discovery actually made the situation even more confusing, because now there was evidence that something had been around the area, but it did not explain what we saw. Over time, we tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the darkness. Maybe we saw an animal from a strange angle. Maybe fear made our minds fill in details that were not really there. That explanation was possible. There were no reports of anyone disappearing in the area. Nobody else reported seeing anything similar. Nothing happened before that night. Nothing happened after. It became one strange event that neither of us could fully explain. Eventually, we decided to accept the most reasonable explanation. Maybe it was just a combination of tired minds, darkness, and an animal. But that did not completely erase the memory. Even years later, my friend and I still occasionally talk, especially if one of us has to be somewhere outside, alone at night. We joke about it, but there is always a little seriousness behind the joke. Because we both remember how that night felt. We remember the empty school, the dark field, the moment she saw something and ran, the moment I saw something that I still cannot explain. Maybe there was a normal answer. Maybe it really was just a wild animal. Maybe our exhausted brains turned a strange sight into something much scarier. But there is one thing I know for sure. I have never forgotten the sound of my friend screaming my name and telling me to drive, because whatever was standing out there in that field, for a few seconds, we both believed we were in real danger. And sometimes, that feeling is the part you remember the most. I never thought I would quit a security job because of one ordinary night shift. Before that night, I thought the job was boring, and honestly, boring was exactly what I wanted. There were no ghosts, no strange creatures, no voices whispering from empty rooms, and nothing supernatural hiding in the dark. But what happened was worse, in a very real way. It was the possibility that another person had been inside the building with me for hours. That thought alone was enough. I had picked up a second job as a night guard for a new school that was still under construction. It was not supposed to be difficult work. The school was almost finished, and most of the building already looked ready from the inside. Fresh walls, clean hallways, empty classrooms, new doors, and that strange smell new buildings have before people start living in them every day. It did not feel old or haunted. It did not have that heavy abandoned building atmosphere. It was just a new school waiting to open. But construction sites have their own problems. When nobody is around, people break in, especially if there are valuable materials inside. Wiring, copper, pipes, tools, equipment, anything that can be stolen and sold. The area had issues with addicts and thieves stealing from empty buildings, so the company wanted someone there overnight to make sure the place stayed secure. That someone was me. My schedule was mostly weekends, Friday and Saturday nights. I would arrive in the evening, stay in the small office, and make regular rounds throughout the building. Every hour or so I would get up, grab my flashlight, and walk through the school. I would check the rooms, check the doors, make sure no one had gotten inside, then go back to the office and wait for the next round. At first it was boring, but boring is the best kind of night security work. A boring night means no one is breaking in. It means no one is hiding in a classroom. It means nothing is moving where it should not be moving. It means the building is just a building, and your shift is only hours of silence, walking, checking, and waiting. The school itself was not huge, but it was large enough to feel different at night. There were around 25 rooms, plus hallways, exterior doors, the gym area, storage spaces, and parts of the building that were still unfinished. During the day, with workers everywhere, it would have felt normal. At night, with all the contractors gone, it became hollow. Every step echoed too clearly. Every door handle felt colder than it should. Every classroom looked the same in the beam of a flashlight. My routine was always the same. Around 6 p.m., after the last contractors left, I would lock the front entrance. Then I would start my checks. I would go room to room, shining my flashlight inside, stepping in far enough to make sure no one was hiding, checking closets or corners if there were any, then moving on. I would test exterior doors, look down hallways, make sure the roof access was secure, and eventually return to the office. Most nights, nothing happened. No strange sounds, no break-ins, no people around, just hours of quiet in a half-finished school. After a while, the routine became automatic. That can be dangerous in its own way. When you check the same doors every hour and they are always locked, you begin to expect them to be locked. When every room is always empty, you begin to expect emptiness. When nothing happens night after night, your mind starts treating the job like waiting, not guarding. Then one Friday night, everything changed. It started like any other shift, except I had been given one specific instruction. I was told not to walk or drive around the backside of the school. They had recently poured concrete and were preparing the area for asphalt. The ground was being worked on, and they did not want anyone disturbing it. I understood. It was simple enough. Stay away from that section outside. No problem. So I stayed away. Inside the building, everything seemed normal. I completed my checks. I locked the doors. I searched the rooms. I checked the roof. I made sure the exterior points were secure. By the time the night got later, I felt completely confident that the building was locked down. Every door was secure. Every room was empty. Nobody was inside. At least, that was what I believed. Around 2 a.m., after hours of doing the same routine over and over, I heard something from the back of the school. The gym was located in that area, and it had doors that led directly outside. The sound came from that direction. It was not a vague noise either. It was not the building settling. It was not wind pushing against something loose. It was clear enough that my body reacted before I even stood up. The doors opened, then quickly closed. For a second, I froze, not because I thought something impossible had happened, but because I knew those doors were supposed to be locked. I had checked them. More than once. Those doors should not have opened. There was no reason for that sound to exist inside a secured building at 2 in the morning. That was the first moment the building stopped feeling empty. I grabbed my flashlight and went to investigate. The hallways felt longer than they had all night. That is what fear does. It stretches distance. A hallway you walk through casually an hour earlier suddenly seems like it goes on forever. The beam of the flashlight no longer feels like enough light. The silence no longer feels peaceful. It feels like something is listening. I moved toward the back of the school, toward the gym doors. Everything was quiet again, too quiet. When I reached the back doors, I checked them, and that was when my stomach tightened. They were unlocked. That immediately bothered me. Those doors were not supposed to open without a key. Someone had to unlock them, or they had somehow been left unlocked despite my checks. I stood there for a second, trying to force my mind into the simplest explanation. Maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I missed that door earlier. Maybe one of the contractors had forgotten to secure it. Maybe the sound had come from pressure or wind, and I was making it bigger than it was. But I knew I had checked those doors. And I knew what I had heard. Then I looked outside. That was when my stomach dropped. There were footprints, fresh footprints, leading away from the door. The ground outside had recently been worked on, so the dirt was soft enough to show marks clearly. Because I had been told not to go back there, I knew no one should have been walking around that area. And earlier, when I checked that door, there had been nothing. No prints, no marks, no sign of anyone. Now there was a trail. Someone had been outside that door. Someone had opened it. Someone had walked away from the building. I locked the door immediately. My mind started racing. I was alone in a mostly completed school at 2 in the morning, and now I had proof that someone had either entered or exited from a door that should have been locked. The whole building seemed to shift around me. It was no longer an empty job site. It was a place with evidence. A place where another person may have moved while I was sitting in the office, unaware. I grabbed my flashlight tighter and started searching. Every room, every hallway, every possible hiding place. The building suddenly felt much bigger than before. The same rooms I had checked a dozen times now felt like they could hold something. Empty classrooms did not look empty anymore. They looked like places where someone could stand pressed against a wall, waiting for the flashlight beam to pass. Doorways felt deeper. Corners felt darker. The gym felt huge and hollow. I searched carefully, but my fear was working against me. Every sound I made echoed back at me and seemed like it came from somewhere else. My own footsteps made me stop more than once. The building had pipes, vents, unfinished spaces, little construction noises that probably happened all the time, but after seeing those footprints, every sound became a possible person. Then I found something else. A door upstairs was open. That door had not been open earlier. I was sure of it. During my previous walkthrough, every door had been closed. That was part of the routine. Check a room, make sure it was clear, close the door, move on. This one was open now, and it felt like the building had just whispered back to me. Inside that room were lockers. The lockers were supposed to be installed in the hallways later, but for now, they had been stored inside that classroom while the tile work was being completed. The room was filled with equipment and materials, with enough objects and shadows to create hiding places everywhere. Rows of lockers, stacked parts, tools, boxes, construction supplies. It was not an empty classroom anymore. It was a room full of cover. I stood at the entrance and felt a very cold thought move through me. What if someone had been there the entire time? Not just outside, not just walking away. Inside, what if someone had entered during the day while the workers were still around? What if they found a hiding spot before my shift even started? What if they waited until the building was locked and everyone else left? What if they had been listening to me walk through the halls for hours? That realization scared me more than anything else. Not the footprints, not the unlocked door, not even the open room. The idea that I might have spent the entire night sharing that building with someone I could not see. Someone could have been watching my routine. They could have learned how often I made rounds. They could have heard me leave the office. They could have stepped out when I passed one hallway and hidden when I returned. They could have waited in that locker room or another room, completely silent. I had been sitting in the office thinking I was alone. Maybe I never was. I searched that room and every second felt wrong. The lockers were perfect for hiding behind. Even if someone could not fit inside them, they could crouch near them, slip between them, or use them to block line of sight. My flashlight moved across metal surfaces, shadows, corners, the floor. I expected at any second to see shoes, a face, a hand, anything, but I found no one. That did not make it better. In some ways, it made it worse. Because the evidence remained, but the person did not. Footprints outside, an unlocked door, an open room upstairs, no explanation, no one to confront, no one to call the police about with certainty. Just a building that suddenly seemed full of empty places someone might have been seconds before I arrived. The footprints looked like they belonged to someone around my size. The shoe size seemed to be about a men's size 12. That made me more uncomfortable. It did not feel like some kid wandering around or a small animal making marks. It looked like an adult. Someone with enough size and confidence to move around a construction site at night. Someone who had a reason to be there, or no good reason at all. I kept searching. I checked rooms I had already checked. I checked doors I already knew should be locked. I checked every hallway again and again. But after that, the building would not return to what it had been. Even when a room was clear, it did not feel clear. Even when a door was locked, it did not feel secure. I could not shake the feeling that I was always one room behind whoever had been there. That is a terrible feeling in a security job. The feeling that you are not guarding the building. The feeling that you are being watched inside it. Hours passed, but the night never relaxed again. I went back to the office, but I did not feel safe there anymore. Before, the office had been my base, the place where I could sit between rounds and let the building be quiet around me. After the footprints, the office felt like a place someone could approach while I was distracted. I kept listening for doors, for movement, for the soft sound of someone stepping in the hallway. Every time the building made a small noise, I looked up. Every shadow in the hallway outside the office looked like it might shift. I kept thinking about the timeline. If someone had left through the gym doors at 2 a.m., where had they been before that? Had they been inside since before 6 p.m.? Had they hidden in a room when I first checked? Had I walked right past them? Did they wait for me to go back to the office before making their move? Did they unlock the door from inside and leave because they realized I was there? Or worse, did someone else leave while someone remained inside? That thought bothered me too. The footprints showed someone walked away from the door. But footprints do not tell you everything. They do not tell you if one person entered and left. They do not tell you if two people were involved. They do not tell you whether someone used the door after hiding inside, or whether someone outside somehow opened it. They do not tell you whether the open room upstairs was connected or just another strange mistake. They only tell you enough to be afraid. I never found out who it was. I never saw anyone. Nothing else happened that night. And somehow, that made the story harder to let go of. If someone had jumped out, if there had been a chase, if the police had caught a thief hiding in the locker room, the fear would have had a clean shape. It would have had a face, a reason, an ending. But because I never saw the person, the fear stayed open. It became a possibility instead of a fact, and possibilities can follow you longer than facts. After that night, the job felt completely different. Before, I was protecting an empty building. After that night, I felt like I was sharing it with someone I could not see. Every round became tense. Every door I checked felt like it might be unlocked, even if I knew I had locked it. Every room felt like it could have changed while I was gone. The building seemed to have too many corners, too many half-finished spaces, too many places for someone to disappear into. Even the new walls and fresh paint no longer made it feel clean. It felt hollow, unfinished, and full of blind spots. Eventually, I left the job. I found another position that paid better and did not require me to spend nights wondering whether someone was hiding nearby. Maybe that sounds like an overreaction, but I do not think it was. Security work is one thing when you know what you are guarding against. It is another thing when you realize someone may have already beaten your routine and been inside the whole time. Looking back, maybe there was a simple explanation. Maybe a contractor forgot to lock the doors. Maybe someone broke in and left quickly. Maybe someone was only looking for shelter. Maybe someone came in from outside, saw or heard me, and ran away. Maybe the open room upstairs had nothing to do with it. All of that is possible, but there is one thought I cannot get rid of. Someone could have been inside with me for 8 hours, while I walked my rounds, while I sat in the office, while I checked rooms and believed they were empty. Someone could have been hiding in a place I had already looked, waiting for the right time to move. Someone could have been close enough to hear my footsteps and know exactly where I was. Someone could have been watching the flashlight beam pass under doors, listening to me open and close rooms, learning my pattern. That is what scared me most. The evidence that someone had been there was bad. The possibility that they had been there the whole time was worse, because the scariest part of that night was not finding footprints. It was realizing how easy it would have been for a person to stay hidden inside a large empty building. A quiet night, a half-finished school, stored lockers, dark classrooms, construction materials, long hallways, one guard doing predictable rounds, and me completely unaware. That night taught me something about security work that I never forgot. The job is not always about what you find. Sometimes it is about what you almost miss, and sometimes the most frightening person in the building is the one you never actually see. When I first heard about the building, I honestly thought everyone was exaggerating. I had worked security jobs before, so I was used to hearing people tell stories. Every workplace has rumors. Every old building has someone claiming they saw something strange. Usually, there is a simple explanation. A strange noise, a shadow, a misunderstanding. So when my boss told me that people had trouble staying at this particular site, I did not take it seriously. Before I even started working there, my boss warned me. He told me that they could never keep anyone stationed at this location for very long. People would quit. People would request transfers. People would say they felt uncomfortable being there. Some employees claimed they saw things. Others said they heard things. But the way my boss explained it was almost like a joke. He was laughing about it. So I laughed too. I remember saying something along the lines of not believing in any of that. And honestly, at the time, I really did not. Besides, the job paid extra because nobody wanted the position. That was enough motivation for me. More money? A quiet post? I thought I had found an easy job. I had no idea what I was signing up for. The first thing I noticed when I arrived was how isolated the building was. To get there, I had to drive through a normal neighborhood. Houses, people, regular life. Then suddenly, at the end of the neighborhood, everything changed. There was a long driveway. A very long driveway. It went through a wooded area and led to the building. That driveway was the only entrance, the only exit. Once you drove down it, you were completely separated from everything else. The building sat surrounded by trees. No nearby houses, no traffic, no people walking around, just a massive structure hidden away in the woods. My boss had told me it used to be a church, but when I arrived, I learned that description was not exactly accurate. The building had a much darker and more complicated history. It was not just a church. Different parts of the building had served different purposes. One section had been used like a juvenile facility for troubled kids. Another section was a school area for those children. Another section had been a convent and living area for elderly Catholic nuns. I was told that some of the nuns had passed away there. Connecting everything together was a huge cathedral-style church area. The entire place was enormous and abandoned. The building was falling apart. There was no proper heating. The only warmth came from a few small space heaters in the front office. There was no air conditioning. There was no indoor bathroom. The only option was a portable toilet outside the front entrance. It was not a comfortable workplace. It felt less like a job site and more like being left behind in a forgotten piece of history. Then I learned more about why the facility had closed. The state had shut it down after allegations of sexual misconduct involving staff and juveniles. There had also been reports of young people inside the facility attempting to harm themselves. The building had simply been left there afterward, waiting for someone to buy it. waiting to be demolished, waiting for something to happen. My job was not complicated on paper. I was there to make sure nobody broke in. I had to perform regular security checks, walk through the entire building, make sure doors were locked, report anything unusual. Simple enough. Except there was one major problem. I was completely alone. The position was a one-person post, and I worked nights. Every night. So imagine walking through a massive abandoned building in the middle of the woods with only a flashlight while everyone else has gone home. Every hallway was dark. Every room was empty. Every sound echoed. The first few weeks were miserable. I was scared, I will admit that. Even though I did not believe in anything supernatural, the environment itself was enough to make anyone uncomfortable. The building had a feeling, a presence, not necessarily something paranormal, just the feeling of being somewhere you were not supposed to be. Around the same time, the movie The Nun came out. That did not help. Being alone overnight in an abandoned religious building while everyone is talking about a horror movie involving a nun was probably the worst possible timing. As I got to know the other security workers, I started hearing their stories. One employee quit because she claimed she heard keys jingling on one of the staircases. Another person said he saw what looked like a little girl carrying a white blanket. One worker who stayed longer told me that something had knocked his hat off his head. Other people did not describe seeing anything specific. They just said they felt uncomfortable, like something about the building was wrong. But strangely enough, I never experienced anything during my rounds. I never saw a figure. I never heard voices. Nothing happened. Eventually, I actually became comfortable there. I started thinking maybe everyone else had just scared themselves. The building was old. Old buildings make noises. People get nervous. That is all. Eventually, because it was freezing cold and the rest of the building was still terrifying to walk through at night, I stopped doing as many rounds. I stayed mostly in the front office. That became my safe area. It was warm. It had lights. It felt normal. Then things started happening. The first time it happened, I was sitting in the office watching a movie. Everything was quiet. Then suddenly, click, the office door unlocked and slowly opened by itself. I froze. The door was close enough that I could reach it without even fully extending my arm. It was right there, and I knew how heavy that door was. This was not a normal interior door. This building had been a secure facility. The doors were thick, heavy, designed for a place where security mattered. And the office was not an open room where air could easily move around. The building had been shut down for years. There was no heating system blowing air, no open windows, no draft, nothing obvious that could explain it. I was sitting alone in a huge abandoned building in the woods at around 11 at night, and my office door had just opened. It scared me badly, but I tried to explain it. Maybe I had not closed it properly. Maybe the lock had failed. Maybe there was some mechanical issue. So from that point on, every time I went through that door, I checked it. I closed it carefully. I tested it. I made sure it was completely locked. Then a few weeks later, it happened again. Then again. Eventually, it happened 6 or 7 times. I even tried recording it with my phone. Of course, it never happened when I was recording, because apparently even strange doors understand the importance of avoiding evidence. A very inconvenient personality trait. Something else started happening too. The electronic locks on nearby doors would activate. These doors required a key card. You had to physically swipe a card to unlock them. But sometimes, while I was sitting in the office, I would hear the electronic buzzing sound, the same sound the doors made when someone scanned their card. But nobody was there. The doors never opened. Only the sound happened. I mentioned it to another employee when I came in for my shift. His reaction surprised me. He did not look shocked. He just casually said, "Yeah, that happens all the time." Then he told me he had seen some strange things there. The way he said it bothered me, not because he was panicking, because he was not. He sounded completely used to it. Eventually, the door opening became less frequent, but the electronic locks continued. Then the banging started. One night I was sitting in the office watching a movie again. Everything was quiet. Then, suddenly, boom, a massive sound came from the ceiling above me. It sounded like something heavy had fallen, like furniture had been thrown across the floor upstairs. The entire ceiling seemed to shake. My desk shook. I froze, because I knew the building was empty. Not mostly empty, completely empty. The building had been abandoned. There was no furniture upstairs, no workers, no residents, nothing, just an empty shell. I immediately left. I walked outside and tried to calm down. Then I called my supervisor. He told me that if I saw anything suspicious or if anything seemed wrong, I should call the police. After some time, my curiosity got the better of me. I needed to know what caused the noise, so I went back inside. Probably not the smartest decision. I had my flashlight. My phone was ready to call emergency services if needed, and I walked upstairs. That area was where the juveniles had lived. The hallways were dark. There were rows of empty rooms, rooms that had once held people. Now they were completely abandoned. I checked everything, every hallway, every room, every corner. Nothing, no fallen objects, no explanation, nothing. I was still scared, but eventually the fear faded enough that I could convince myself there had to be a reason. Maybe the building was settling. Maybe something moved somewhere I could not see. Maybe there was a normal explanation. Then, a few weeks later, it started again. Except this time it was not one sound. It was multiple. Boom, 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 3 or 4 loud impacts. Sometimes 5. It sounded like someone was throwing heavy furniture around upstairs. But there was nothing there. No furniture. No people. Nothing. That was when I finally decided I had enough. Shortly afterward, I found another job. A better paying job. A job where I did not spend every night wondering if I was about to hear something impossible. Looking back, I still do not know what happened in that building. Maybe there was a logical explanation. Old, abandoned buildings can create strange sounds. Structures shift, pipes move, materials expand and contract. There are many possibilities, but I also understand why so many people left. Because, even if there was a completely normal explanation for everything, being alone in that place at night was terrifying. The history, the isolation, the darkness, the silence, everything about it made your imagination work overtime. And sometimes the scariest places are not scary because of what you see. They are scary because of what you cannot explain. That building was just a building. Old walls, empty rooms, a forgotten place. But spending night after night alone inside it made it feel like something much more. And I will never forget walking those dark hallways with only a flashlight, wondering if I was truly alone. For years, there was an old abandoned building I passed every time I went to visit a friend. My friend lived in a trailer park, and to get there, I had to drive down back gravel roads that never felt busy. It was not the kind of area where cars were constantly passing or people were walking along the shoulder. It was quiet, open, and a little forgotten. The roads were rough in places, with dust rising behind the car when it had not rained, and trees and empty land stretching out on both sides. It was the kind of drive where you had too much time to look around. Most of the time, nothing changed. Same gravel, same fields, same stretches of trees, same feeling that you were moving through a part of town most people did not think about unless they lived there. But along that route, there was one building that always caught my attention. It was a small concrete building sitting off the road. Old, really old. Not old in a charming way, like an old farmhouse or a historic place someone might restore. It looked abandoned in the full meaning of the word. Forgotten, damaged, left behind. The doors were gone. Parts of the walls looked broken or worn down. The openings were dark, like the inside was swallowing the daylight instead of letting it in. Every time I drove past it, I looked over, and every time the same thought came into my mind. I should check that place out. There is something about abandoned buildings that pulls on you when you are younger. They feel like secrets sitting out in the open. Nobody is using them anymore, but they are still there, still standing, still holding whatever was left behind. You start wondering what happened there, who built it, who walked through it, why it was abandoned, why nobody cared enough to tear it down or fix it. An abandoned building feels like it is hiding a story, and when you are curious, that can be hard to ignore. I used to imagine walking inside, stepping through one of the broken openings, looking around with my phone or a flashlight, finding old graffiti, empty rooms, maybe broken glass, maybe old furniture, maybe nothing at all. I thought it would be creepy, but interesting. Something to tell people about later. One of those dumb little adventures that feels bigger than it really is when you are young. But every time I thought about actually doing it, I felt something else. Something that stopped me. It was not fear in the obvious sense. I did not see anyone standing there. I did not hear anything strange from inside. There was no face in the doorway, no movement in the shadows, no warning sign that explained why I should stay away. It was just a feeling, a quiet, heavy feeling, a warning feeling, the kind that does not shout at you, but keeps pressing against the back of your mind. Do not go in there. Leave it alone. Keep driving. I never understood why I felt that way. From the road, the building was just a concrete shell. Creepy, yes, but not unusual for that kind of area. Old places like that sit abandoned all over the place. People drive past them every day. Kids probably dare each other to go inside. Some people might not even notice them. But I noticed that one. And something about it noticed me back. Or at least that is how it felt. That sounds dramatic, but that is the only way I can explain it. Each time I passed, I felt drawn to it and pushed away from it at the same time. Curiosity would pull me toward the idea of exploring it, and then some deeper instinct would step in and say no. So I always kept driving. I told myself I would check it out someday when I had more time, someday when someone else was with me, someday in daylight, someday when the feeling was not so strong. But someday never came. Then one day, I drove by and noticed something different. The building had been fenced off. There was old yellow tape around the area, but it was ripped up and hanging strangely in places, like it had been there for a while, or like people had already messed with it. The sight of it made me slow down a little. Not enough to stop, but enough to look longer than usual. At first, I did not think too much of it. Abandoned buildings get fenced off all the time. Maybe kids had been going inside. Maybe someone complained. Maybe the property owner finally realized it was unsafe. Maybe part of it had collapsed. Maybe someone got hurt. Maybe it was just liability. Those were all normal explanations. But the fence changed the building. Before, it had been abandoned but accessible, sitting there like an invitation no one had accepted. Now it looked marked, separated, like someone had finally pointed at it and said, "Stay away from this place." The yellow tape made it worse. Even ripped and old, yellow tape has a way of changing how you see something. It makes a place feel official in a bad way. It makes you think of accidents, police, danger, search scenes, things people were not supposed to find. I told myself not to overthink it. It was probably nothing, just an unsafe building being blocked off. Still, the strange feeling stayed. Even after the fence went up, I kept thinking about that building. I still looked at it whenever I passed. I still wondered what was inside. But now I wondered in a different way. Less curious, more uneasy. It felt like the building had gone from mysterious to forbidden, and I could not explain why that bothered me so much. Some time later, I was at my grandmother's house. We were sitting around watching television. I do not remember exactly what show it was, but it was something like Dateline, or one of those true crime programs that plays in the background until something catches your attention. At first, I was not really focused. It was just TV noise, a narrator's voice, interviews, serious music, the usual true crime structure where a normal life slowly turns into something terrible. Then, the story changed. They started talking about a girl from a nearby county who had disappeared. She had been at a party. Afterward, nobody could find her. The case became a mystery. People searched. Investigators looked for clues. Her family wanted answers. The whole thing became one of those local stories that spreads quietly through communities because it could have happened to someone people knew. A young girl at a party. A night that should have ended with her going home. Then nothing. No safe return, no clear answer, just disappearance. I began paying more attention. There is something especially chilling about true crime when it happens near places you know. When the story is far away, it feels terrible but distant. When it is connected to your own area, the fear comes closer. You recognize the kind of roads, the kind of houses, the kind of people, the kind of quiet places where something could happen without anyone noticing right away. Then they mentioned that some of her clothing had been found. Not all in one place, scattered in different locations. That detail made me uncomfortable immediately. I cannot fully explain why, but there was something about it that felt colder than the rest of the story. A missing person case is already disturbing, but scattered belongings make it feel more real. They are traces of someone. Proof that she had been somewhere. Proof that something had happened beyond the last place people remembered seeing her. The show continued. They said a child had discovered something important, a piece of clothing, something the girl had been wearing the night she disappeared. And then they said where it had been found, inside an abandoned building. The moment they showed it or described it, my stomach dropped. It was that building, the same small concrete building I had passed so many times, the same building on the gravel road, the same one I had stared at again and again from my car, the same one I had wanted to explore, the same one that always made some part of me say no. I remember sitting there in my grandmother's house, watching the television, and feeling the whole room fall quiet around me, even if nobody else noticed. The screen was still talking. The story was still moving. But my mind had locked onto one thing. I knew that place. I had been near that place. I had almost gone inside that place. Suddenly, it was not just an abandoned building anymore. It was not just a creepy structure on a back road. It was connected to something real and disturbing. A missing girl, clothing found inside, a case people had searched and worried over, a piece of someone's last known story sitting inside the same building I had almost explored out of curiosity. All those times I drove past it, I never knew. All those times I looked at those broken openings, I never imagined the answer to my curiosity could be something like that. I thought maybe I would find graffiti, trash, old bottles, signs of teenagers hanging around. Maybe nothing. I never imagined finding a piece of a missing girl's life. That thought made me feel sick. I started thinking about how many times I had been close to that building, how many times I had slowed down mentally, if not physically, and thought about pulling over, how many times I had imagined stepping inside, how close I might have come to seeing something I was never meant to see. And then I thought about that feeling, that quiet warning, the one I had never been able to explain, the one that always told me not to go in. Of course, there could be simple explanations. Maybe it was just because the building looked creepy. Maybe anyone would have felt uneasy looking at it. Maybe my brain noticed details I did not consciously understand. Maybe the location, the emptiness, the broken doors, the way it sat off the gravel road, all of it combined to create a normal sense of discomfort. Humans are good at sensing when something feels wrong, even if we do not know why. Sometimes we notice small signs without realizing it. Fresh tire tracks, a disturbed entrance, a strange smell, a feeling of being exposed, a place that looks too quiet, a place where the shadows do not sit right. Maybe my mind picked up on something like that. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was coincidence. But after learning what had been found there, I could never look at the building the same way again. The fence, the ripped yellow tape, the missing girl, the scattered clothing, the piece found inside. All of it connected in my mind, and the old building became something darker than I had ever imagined. It is strange how a place can change without physically changing. The concrete walls were the same. The missing doors were the same. The broken openings were the same. The gravel road was the same. But once I knew the story connected to it, the building became heavier. It felt less like an abandoned structure and more like a witness. A silent witness. It had been sitting there the whole time, holding a piece of something terrible, while I drove past and wondered what secrets it had inside. That is the part that stays with me most. Not just what was found there, but the fact that I had felt something before I knew anything. Before I knew about the girl. Before I knew about the party. Before I knew about the clothing. Before I knew there was any real reason to be uncomfortable. I had always looked at that building and felt like I should stay away. That bothers me more than I can explain. Maybe instinct is just the brain working faster than language. Maybe some part of me understood that the place was wrong before I had the facts. Maybe the building looked abandoned in a way that suggested more than simple neglect. Maybe it had that feeling because people had already been there, because something had already happened, because the area around it carried signs I did not consciously recognize. Or maybe I was just lucky. Maybe my fear was ordinary, and it happened to save me from walking into a place tied to something horrible. Either way, I listened to it. I never went inside, and I am grateful for that, because I do not know what I would have found. Maybe by the time I passed it, whatever had been there was already gone except for the clothing. Maybe investigators had already found what mattered. Maybe there would have been nothing inside but dust, trash, and broken concrete. Maybe I would have walked in, looked around, scared myself, and left without ever understanding the history of the place. But maybe not. Maybe I would have found something that would have stayed in my mind forever. Maybe I would have walked through the doorway and seen that piece of clothing before anyone else did. Maybe I would have stepped into a story that was not mine and never been able to forget it. That is the terrifying thing about curiosity. It feels harmless, right up until it gives you an answer you cannot undo. When you are young, abandoned buildings feel like adventures. You think the worst thing that can happen is getting caught trespassing, stepping on broken glass, or scaring yourself in the dark. You do not think about missing people. You do not think about evidence. You do not think about the possibility that a place has been touched by someone's final known moments. You do not think the story hidden inside might be real. After that, I never wanted to explore the building anymore. The curiosity vanished completely. There was nothing inside worth seeing. Whatever mystery had made it interesting before had turned into something sad and frightening. I did not need to walk through those broken openings to know the place had a darkness to it. The small voice had been enough. Sometimes people talk about gut feelings like they are silly, like they are just fear, imagination, or paranoia. And sometimes they are. Sometimes your mind makes a harmless place feel scary because it is dark, old, or unfamiliar. But other times, that feeling is the only warning you get. I do not know which one this was. I only know that every time I thought about going inside that building, something stopped me. And later, when I learned what had been found there, I stopped questioning that feeling. The building was always just there, sitting beside a gravel road like a forgotten piece of concrete. Most people probably drove past without caring. Some may have never noticed it at all. But for me, it became a reminder that places can hold stories silently. They do not announce what they have seen. They do not tell you what happened inside them. They just sit there, weathered and empty looking, while people pass by and assume there is nothing to know. But sometimes there is something to know. Sometimes an empty building is not empty in the way you think. Sometimes it has already been part of someone's worst night. Sometimes the reason a place feels wrong is because something wrong touched it before you got there. I never found out what the building looked like from the inside, and after learning what I learned, I do not think I ever wanted to. I do not need that picture in my head. I already have enough. The road, the concrete walls, the missing doors, the broken openings, the fence, the ripped yellow tape, the television screen at my grandmother's house. The moment I realized the place on the news was the same place I had passed again and again. That moment still gives me chills, because in that second, all my old curiosity turned into dread. All those thoughts of I should check it out someday became thank God I never did. That is what the story means to me now. Not every place needs to be explored. Not every mystery deserves your attention. Not every abandoned building is just an abandoned building. Sometimes curiosity is not worth the answer. And sometimes the safest thing you can do is listen to that small voice in your head when it tells you to keep driving. Some stories are frightening because they involve monsters. Other stories are worse because they remind us that the real monsters are human. The story of Jamie Kloss is one of those stories. It is not a ghost story. It is not a legend from the woods. It is not about something supernatural moving through the dark. It happened in the real world, inside a real home, to a real family in a quiet part of rural Wisconsin. That is what makes it so disturbing. It began in a place most people would have thought was safe. A small community, quiet roads, families who knew each other, houses surrounded by trees, fields, and silence. The kind of place where people often believe terrible things happen somewhere else, in big cities, in dangerous neighborhoods, in places with strangers everywhere. Not there. Not inside a family home. Not to a normal 13-year-old girl. Jamie Kloss was only 13 years old. Before everything happened, she was just a regular teenager, living an ordinary life. She went to school. She spent time with her family. She lived in a community where people recognized faces and names. Nothing about her life was supposed to become a national story. Nothing about that house should have become the center of fear, grief, and unanswered questions. But one night changed everything. In the middle of the night, police were called to the Kloss family home after a horrifying discovery. James' parents had been murdered inside their house. When officers arrived, the situation was already terrifying, but almost immediately, one question became bigger than all the others. Where was Jamie? She was gone. Not hiding in another room, not safely with a neighbor, not nearby waiting for help. Gone, that single fact turned an already devastating scene into something even more frightening. A child had disappeared from a house where something terrible had happened, and nobody knew where she was. There was no simple explanation, no immediate answer, no clear sign pointing investigators straight to her location, only a terrible absence. That is one of the most haunting parts of any missing child case. The empty space where the child should be becomes louder than anything else. Her bedroom, her belongings, her school, her routines, the people who knew her, all of it suddenly points to one unbearable question. Where is she? In the beginning, nobody knew. The uncertainty was terrifying. People naturally search for patterns when something horrible happens. They ask questions because questions feel like a way to fight fear. How could this happen? Who would do this? Was there a connection? Did someone know the family? Was Jamie taken by someone she recognized? Was she still alive? Was she somewhere nearby? Had anyone seen anything? But the truth was hidden. For weeks, investigators searched. Law enforcement worked the case. The community waited. The entire country watched. Every day that passed made the fear heavier. In cases like this, time feels cruel. The first hours are desperate. The first days are filled with urgent hope. Then, weeks begin to pass, and people start fighting against the worst thoughts. Still, hope remained. People wanted to believe Jamie was alive. They wanted to believe she was somewhere, waiting for the right moment, surviving minute by minute. But no one knew. That was the agony of it. A normal family's life had been destroyed, and a young girl had vanished into an unknown darkness. What made the case especially chilling was how ordinary everything had been before that night. There was no dramatic warning that the whole world could point to afterward. No obvious sign that danger was coming. No clear moment where everyone could say, that was when they should have known. Jamie and her family were simply living their lives. Then, someone else made a decision. That is the part that makes this story so frightening. People want to believe danger usually gives warnings. A suspicious message, a threatening phone call, a strange person hanging around, a relationship that turned bad, a conflict that slowly escalated, something that could have been noticed, reported, avoided, or stopped. But sometimes the world is not that fair. Sometimes there is no warning. Sometimes the victim does not even know they have become a target. According to investigators, the person responsible was not someone Jamie knew. There was no long history between them, no relationship, no slow gaining of trust, no obvious connection that her family could have recognized and feared. He had reportedly seen her from a distance and decided he wanted to take her. That detail is one of the most disturbing parts of the entire case, because it means Jane was not pulled into danger through a long chain of choices. She was not knowingly connected to someone dangerous. Her family was not living with some visible threat hanging over them. She was simply a child living a normal life, and someone else, from outside that life, made a horrific decision. That kind of randomness is hard for people to accept. It makes the world feel less stable. It means a safe home may not feel as safe as it should. It means a quiet community can still be reached by danger. It means someone can live an ordinary day without knowing that another person has already decided to destroy it. That is the kind of fear that stays with people. The days after Jamie disappeared were filled with searching, worry, rumors, and dread. Her community was shaken. People who had once thought of their town as quiet and safe now had to live with the knowledge that something unimaginable had happened close to them. Families looked at their own homes differently. Parents held their children closer. Every unknown car, every strange noise, every piece of news felt heavier than before. The entire country watched because the case touched something deep in people. A child had vanished. Her parents were gone, and no one knew where she was. For 88 days, Jamie was missing. 88 days is a long time to the outside world, but it is almost impossible to imagine what it must have felt like for her. 3 months of fear. 3 months separated from everything familiar. 3 months of people searching, praying, hoping, and fearing the worst. The story could have ended in silence. Many people were afraid it would. Then, in the middle of a cold Wisconsin winter, something happened that shocked everyone. Jamie appeared. She walked out onto a road and found a woman who was walking her dog. She was alive. After almost 3 months, she had escaped. That moment is almost impossible to describe without feeling the weight of it. A young girl who had been missing for 88 days suddenly appeared on a road in the cold, alive, looking for help. The fear, the uncertainty, the worst possibilities that had haunted everyone for weeks were suddenly broken by one astonishing fact. She had survived. She had found a way out. That is where the story changes. It does not stop being horrifying, because what happened to her and her family will always be horrifying. But it becomes something else too. It becomes a survival story. A story about a child who endured something unimaginable and still found the courage and timing to escape. That is the part people should never forget. Jamie was not only a victim of a terrible crime, she was also the person who got herself out. When she reached that woman walking her dog, she reached the outside world again. She reached help. She reached safety. The unknown was no longer completely unknown. The child people had searched for and feared for was alive. But the answers that followed were deeply disturbing. The person responsible had not been part of Jamie's life. He had not been someone her family trusted. He had not slowly entered their home or become familiar to them. He was, in the most frightening sense, an outside danger that chose them. That truth is difficult, because it does not give people comfort. It does not give them a simple lesson like, do not trust this kind of person, or watch for this exact warning sign. It shows something much colder. Sometimes, a person with harmful intentions can decide on their own to target someone who has no idea they are being watched or chosen. Jamie was living her life. Her parents were living theirs. Then one person's decision shattered everything. That is why the case remains so haunting. It is not only about what happened, it is about the lack of warning, the suddenness, the way an ordinary night became a nightmare without giving the family any chance to prepare for it. A home is supposed to be the place where people can let their guard down. Families sleep there. Children feel safe there. Parents believe the walls and doors protect the people they love most. But in this case, danger came directly to that home. It entered the place where safety should have been strongest. That is a very specific kind of horror. Not the horror of an unfamiliar alley, not the horror of being lost in the woods, the horror of being targeted while living a normal life inside your own house. For weeks, the outside world was left with questions. Every day without Jamie created more fear. In missing person cases, people look for hope in tiny pieces of information. A possible sighting, a clue, a timeline, a small statement from investigators. Anything that might mean the person is still alive. But hope can be painful too, because it has to fight against silence. And there was so much silence. No simple answer. No immediate rescue. No clear public explanation, just a missing 13-year-old girl and a community waiting in fear. Then, after 88 days, she did what so many people had been praying she could somehow do. She escaped. That word sounds short, but it carries enormous weight. Escape means there was danger behind her. It means she had to wait for a chance. It means she had to act. It means she had to trust that if she reached someone, they would help her. It means that even after everything she had gone through, some part of her kept looking for a way back to life. That is strength, not movie strength, not dramatic, easy strength. Real strength, the kind that survives one moment at a time until a chance appears. The woman walking her dog became the person James reached first. That detail is simple, but powerful. After months of being missing, her return to the world began with an ordinary moment. A woman on a road, a dog, a cold day. Something normal becoming the doorway back to safety. There is something deeply emotional about that contrast. The story began with a terrible act inside a home. It changed when James stepped onto a road and found help. A road can be lonely. A winter road in rural Wisconsin can feel empty and frozen. But for James, that road became the path back. The case also forced people to think about how fragile normal life can be. Before that night, James' family was not famous. Their home was not a symbol of tragedy. Their community was not known across the country for fear and loss. They were ordinary people in an ordinary place. Then everything changed. That is often what frightens people most about real-life cases. It is not that they are impossible, it is that they are possible. Not common, not expected, but possible. A family can be living a normal evening. A child can be preparing for another school day. A community can feel safe. Then, without warning, the normal world can be torn open. People try to protect themselves by believing there is always a clear reason. They want to think every terrible event comes with signs. They want to believe if they are careful enough, aware enough, smart enough, nothing like that could ever happen close to them. But James' story shows a truth that is much harder to face. Sometimes there is no obvious mistake, no clear warning, no relationship that explains it, no moment where the family could have known, just one person making a violent and cruel choice. That is why the randomness of the case feels so terrifying. It removes the comfort of simple explanation. It makes people realize that sometimes danger does not announce itself with a loud knock or a visible threat. Sometimes it watches from a distance. Sometimes it chooses silently. Sometimes the person in danger does not know anything has changed until it is already happening. That thought is deeply unsettling. But James' story is not only about fear, it is also about survival. The actions of one person caused enormous pain. The loss of her parents is something no child should ever have to endure. The time she was missing was filled with fear and uncertainty for everyone who cared about her and everyone who followed the case. But Jamie's escape showed something powerful too. It showed courage. It showed determination. It showed the importance of hope, even when the situation seems impossible. There are stories where the darkness wins completely. This was not one of them. Jamie lived. She escaped. She found help. That matters. It does not erase the horror. It does not undo what happened. It does not make the tragedy simple or clean. Nothing could. But it gives the story a final part that is not controlled by the person who harmed her. The final part belongs to Jamie. The part where she got out. The part where she reached the road. The part where she survived. The most frightening part of this story is the realization that danger does not always look like danger at first. It does not always come from someone close. It does not always come with a long list of warning signs. Sometimes it arrives from outside a person's life and changes everything in a single night. A normal life, a normal family, a normal day, a quiet home in rural Wisconsin. And then one person's choice turned that life into something the whole country would remember. That is the horror. But the survival is what should be remembered too. Because after 88 days, Jamie walked out of the place where she had been kept and found someone who could help her. She did what so many people hoped she would somehow be able to do. She came back alive. Her story is haunting because it shows both sides of the world, unimaginable cruelty and incredible strength. It shows how quickly safety can be shattered, but also how powerful survival can be. It reminds people that hope can exist even in a story that begins with devastation. It reminds us that the person who caused the horror did not get to write the ending. Jamie did. And that is why, when people remember this case, they should remember the fear. Yes, they should remember the randomness, the lack of warning, the quiet home, and the long 88 days of uncertainty. But more than anything, they should remember the road, the cold Wisconsin road, the woman walking her dog, the moment a missing girl stepped back into the world, and the fact that after everything, Jamie Kloss survived. The stories may be over, but some nights do not end when the video does. The people you heard tonight were not looking for fear. They were living normal lives until one moment changed the way they saw the world around them. Tell me in the comments which story stayed with you the longest. Subscribe to Nachtmeier Witness for more true accounts from people who saw something they wish they could forget. Good night, and if you wake up suddenly, do not assume it was just a dream.